everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 17 of ORB on the Movements of the Earth. And last week, we had quite a surprise as the entire story shifted to 25 years in the future. No big deal. No big deal at all. But yeah, we've shifted into the future. Yolanta is nowhere to be found. I'm sure we've not seen the last of her. But instead, we have Schmidt, who is a very interesting character, along with a couple of others who we've been going back and forth in time with. And I'm curious to know, like, who the girl in the OP is, who the mysterious, like, who the kid in the background was, that Schmidt, and all of this. And apparently they are looking for the works of Bodini and Aksha, surprising no one, to try to further heliocentrism. So last episode was a lot of setup to this new arc that we started. So I'm really curious going into episode 17 to see, like, where are we going with this and where is it leading to? So, and we may be going backwards and forwards in time. They established that last week, so anything goes, basically. But I do have two comments I want to talk about before we start into this. One comment is from Moomin Komet for episode 15, saying, I can only imagine what Nowak was feeling and thinking. I wonder if he blames himself or does he blame God? I absolutely feel great sympathy for him. A very complicated character for sure. And last week was such a tease because we didn't see Yolanta or Nowak. And I was like, we spent all this time building them up. And then last week they just didn't show us either of them. And this poncho is extremely hot. So girl is taking this off for the record while we do this reaction, because like 2 layers with this light, not working. We're stripping off our layers just like Nowak's character was stripping off his layers as well. But additionally, I love Yolanta's gloves. Novak's mistake was the room he gave her to grow up. I do think he is a wonderful father and a crappy inquisitor. I mean, he's good at his shitty job. And Antony is a bitch. What a spiteful turd. Yes, hypocrisy, jealousy, and ambition is who he is. Glad other people are on the Antony not likey train. I'm glad I'm not the only one. But yeah, so I do think that Novak didn't make a mistake with letting Yolanta grow because it's made her into the character she is today, but it did put her in danger. So that's kind of where we're at now with this. So yeah. Anyway, we also have a comment about the episode 15 from Yosel Crescent, saying, now that everything has been revealed, I have some theories I want to pour out on to Bodini. Now, this is a much longer comment that I'm going to go through. I'm going to highlight the parts I wanted to talk about with you all. But if you want to go to episode 15 on YouTube, there's a big old long comment there and you could check it out. But they said, when Bodini accepted Aksha's sacrifice to buy time, I don't think he considered for a moment using it to escape himself. He had a choice between writing the letter and delivering it safely into Grabowski's room, or to just steal a horse and escape, and it's obvious which one he chose. He also seemed unharmed and resilient when he was brought into the torture room, so I believe he didn't even resist arrest after he put his plan into motion. I forget that they had horses. I thought with the whole point of Aksha digging the tunnel, you can't take a horse through a tunnel. I thought it was just so that they would walk through the tunnel, escape. I didn't know that they had horses. So I figured they were using the tunnel to escape that he dug, and it wouldn't have been big enough to accommodate a man and a horse. So that's where my logic was in episode 15 discussing that. But yeah, it definitely makes sense that Bodini just turned himself in. And then in terms of the book that Aksha wrote that Bodini burned in front of him, it would also explain why Aksha, he wanted him to get away so badly. Not only he sent Aksha away incessantly because once they were discovered, he also planned to part from him as soon as the research was over. In the tavern scene before everything went awry, Aksha said he was aware of Bodini leaving, but he only found out very late. And my theory is that it was right during that evening with the burning of the journal, when Bodini decided he was going to place the target on himself and not involve anyone else any longer. Which would explain why he told Aksha, let's meet again in a world that accepts revolution. AKA, when there's no more danger on their steps. I find their arc amazing in its rewatchability. I can't wait to go back through and look at it again. The way Bodini was portrayed in a bad light 90% of the time must have been a deliberate artistic choice. Oh, absolutely! To build up the greater plot point. But to watch their arc for a second time, knowing that everything happens after, it makes it so much sweeter. Bodini really put Aksha above everything else in more ways than we might think. Now, here's the thing. I do believe, in my humble opinion, that Bodini was not as kind and as open and, sacrificial of himself at the beginning of his arc with Aksha as he was at the end. I don't think that it was that, this whole time Bodini was actually this amazing guy that was going to sacrifice himself. I don't think it was. I think it was through working with Aksha and through working with Yolenta, but mainly Aksha, that he developed this open-mindedness. And I feel as if I think the turning point with Bodini was when he first read Aksha's writing. And I think that's what kind of was the snap turning point for him, because after that, that's when he really gets involved in writing the journal, making sure it's all written out and all of that. And that's when he goes to the beggars and does all that point. So I feel like that was a turning point. I feel like Bodini was maybe not as warm-hearted at first, but Aksha helped open that up, which just, fuels my shipping of them even more. So yeah, thank you so much for these comments. I really appreciate it. Very much so. I'm not going to waste any more of y'all's time. We need to get into this episode and see what's going to go on. So we're not going to waste any more time doing that. But thank you all so much for the comments. I'm really excited to get into this week's episode. So with that being said, we are going to start Orb on the Movements of the Earth. And it's episode 17. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's go. Well, I'm back with this poncho on to see if I'm going to sweat through it or not. But whoa, okay. This episode, as I was getting through it, I was like, we have lots to talk about. We have lots to talk about. I had to go make a big boiling cup of tea, get ready, and bring Whiteboard-kun back out. Welcome back, Whiteboard-kun, as we do some more charting of the graphs with the new ARC version. You know what? I thought about making a chart similar to earlier episodes where it was like heliocentrism and the church and all this, but as we've learned with this series, we refine our tastes as we go, we refine our research, and we evolve along with it. And that has evolved our little graph here to what it is now. And I'm going to go back through that here in a little bit. But Draka and her uncle are interesting additions to the cast, and Draka has all of this money. I love the idea of Draka wading through all of this money and just kind of like Scrooge McDuck style in this little nomad village, just wading through all the money and being like, it's not enough. It's not enough. I'm still afraid. And that's kind of a big turning point in this episode. And in kind of the arc about all of this is about, we're getting a little bit more individualized with individual people and their own beliefs and their core values and their morals and how that ties into the broader picture of their spirituality. This series is really going in places I did not expect it to go, and I'm really excited about it. So we need to put Draka up here. Draka's big thing is that her father died while pillaging. Her father died while pillaging, and she has formed this core belief that she needs the more money she has, the happier she will be, and the less afraid of death she will be. And, yeah, that's something that we can tie a lot to now in our own modern society. There's a lot of things that can tie to modern society in this episode, and I was like, woo, like biting at the bit to talk to you all about it, but we need to just dive into it. So we've met Draka. Draka is this point of the intro. I think it's good to know that now I believe the young kid in last episode is Schmidt. Is Schmidt as a child. Draka is not related to, although the woman that was Schmidt's or that little kid's mom looks similar to Draka, but it's just the animation style. There they go. So that guy that was in the OP previously, that I was like, that had the money that was bloody. It was all foreshadowing the stuff with Draka to come. So that is Draka's uncle. And Draka's uncle is pretty much atheist. We can put that on there. They're atheist. And they do not believe in God, and instead are driven by whatever their conviction is. Their conviction is their drive. And their drive is to stay alive no matter what. Which we're going to talk about. So yeah, the stay alive no matter what. We're going to talk about that. That's such an interesting thing to compare here. And so we're going to get into that, which I'm going to find pretty interesting. And I'm going to get to this, don't you worry. But we need to establish that this timeline that we have right now with Draka is happening in the present, which we need to establish is 25 years later. 25 years later, and the uncle has essentially traded Draka for his life to be spared. And Draka is presumably going to be sold into slavery. Sold into slavery, or at the very least trafficked. At the very least trafficked. Her body will be trafficked. Now, whether that's sexual or not, I'd rather not think about that if I'm being honest, but it's not off the table, and we all know that. So all that could be brought back are the money with the blood. So there's this green. I like the fact that the cloth that is carrying the money is not only like, I know we associate the color gold with greed, but we associate green with envy. But I also feel like green is tied to greed as well, because I think of currency like paper currency that's usually portrayed as being green, even though it's like an off-white. But now our world is evolving so much that a lot of currency, even it's not crypto, I'm not a crypto person, do not worry. But a lot of our currency is digital. So it's, changes a little bit. But I went to the bank the other day and I needed to withdraw some money, and the bank was like, well, we could write you a cashier's check. And it was green. So that makes me think of that. But yeah, so it's all that could be brought back. Now we're going to talk about what Draka takes from this and how I don't agree with what she takes from it, but it's fine. But the point is that she looks towards the light and the sun's coming up in the morning, and it makes her sad. So it makes her grieve. So I liked this idea that we've had this kind of thing associating light with truth. We've had that truth or knowledge. We've had that going on throughout this series. Every time there's a candle or a torch or something, it's symbolically connected to our characters discovering a truth or knowledge. And normally, when our characters see the sun shine or something, it's a dawning of a new day. But for Draka associates the sunshine with the morning, and with the morning being of when they're grieving their father's death. Which I think is going to come into play, like Draka's going to see, every character has seen that starry sky at some point. So Draka's going to see that starry sky at some point, and maybe it's going to be the polar opposite. Instead of being, the morning and the sun reminding them of something horrible that's happened, the starlight and the moon will remind them of something good. So we'll see about that. But regardless, she's working through grief. So we find out that we go back with what the uncle has told her about learning and everything, and we'll talk into that. But she's a cartographer, so she draws maps and everything in exchange for money, and people in the village give her funds for it, and she helps them out. And so she basically gives the village a talk about capitalism. And she's like, you promised to listen in exchange for my work. And he's like, okay, fine. And so we get to see that they're in this nomad village. It looks very simple. It looks very peaceful. Everybody's working. And so Draka's big argument in this that gets brought up is basically capitalism. It's basically this idea that she's like, there should be more efficiency, more efficient ways to earn money. And it's like, okay, more efficient ways to earn money. And she talks about, with the village leader, she says, at present, we divide our profits equally amongst the tribe. So it's kind of like, is it socialism? I feel bad. I don't want to be one of those people that just calls it socialism when it's not. But if I'm gonna describe it, It's like socialism, the definitions. So I'm going to go and try to find here AEI, which, what does AEI stand for? American Enterprise Institute is, this one feels a little bit biased. It's hard to find. A lot of people are like, why socialism fails and all of this, but let's go to Wikipedia. They're going to be the most like objective. So it's an economic and political philosophical philosophy encompassing diverse economic social structures. I just want to get to the root of it. So the history of socialism had its origins in the Enlightenment in the 1789 French Revolution, along with changes that brought, although the precedents were earlier with movements and ideas from that. The Communist Manifesto was written by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in 1847 to 48, just before the revolutions of 1848 swept across Europe, expressing what they termed scientific socialism. So, and then there's democratic socialism. There's all these things for it. I really want to get to like more earlier takes than that. Earlier socialist thoughts took influence for diverse range of philosophies such as civic republicanism, enlightenment, rationalism. That's interesting. Rationalism, and then romanticism, materialism. Basically, the idea is that its socialist views view creativity as an essential aspect of human nature and define freedom as a state of being where individuals are able to express creativity unhindered by the constraints of material scarcity or coercive social institutions. The socialist concept of individuality is intertwined with the concept of individual creative expression. Marx believed the expansion of the productive forces and technology was the basis for the expansion of human freedom. I want to go before that. Essentially, I mean, we can compare different philosophies and types. I feel like this is not quite up to the socialism as we know it, because I think we have so many political ties from the 19th and 20th century, and this is before then. So I don't want to like put the cart before the horse necessarily, but the way they describe it is we're going to just put like a little form of socialism. It kind of is in ways. But basically, it's the idea that whatever profit they earn is divided equally. Amongst the tribe, is how it goes. And Draka points out that this leads some people to be lazy. So some don't pull their weight because of this. Some don't pull their weight, and others end up working harder than others. So to prevent that, those who contributed more should be rewarded. So you have the contributions. Whoever contributes more gets more. I don't know if that's necessarily capitalism. So as I say that, I'm like, is it capitalism? Is it? In fact, they could even get all of it. Now that's capitalism. So they could get all of it. And I was just like, greed, greed, greed. So if we distribute less, the sense of urgency, I mean, this is very indicative of our current reality. So if we distribute less, then the sense of FOMO, sense of urgency, will accelerate competition. Right? And the whole tribe will benefit. We're going to discuss that whole tribe benefiting. And in Draka's words, the whole tribe benefits. But that in itself, we're going to talk about that. That in itself is interesting as a statement. And the village leader's like, yeah, no. The village leader's like, we're grateful for your efforts. You do a lot for the people. No one else thinks as much about the future as you. The village leader's not saying that Draka is necessarily wrong to have these thoughts. He's saying, like, you clearly are putting a lot of thought into the village and you're thinking about our future. However, and you have such a sharp memory, you can draw maps of abandoned villages after one trip. So he's like, we rely. So then the guy goes, okay, look, here's the thing. Your contributions are very helpful because you draw the maps. And you draw the maps to retrieve discarded fabrics. And from there, that's kind of how they make a lot of their money. They're like, we get these discarded fabrics and kind of do like an upcycling thing where we would safely retrieve the fabrics and our division of labor transforms them into new products. And then we have a division of labor that makes new things out of what your maps have helped us to find. So he's like, we really have like an assembly line of tasks going. Rather than let each person work on their own, we could improve efficiency and quality by assigning specialized tasks. So this part here where she's like, what we could do is instead of everyone individually like spread out, we basically delineate. We delineate and designate specialized tasks to certain people. Which it's interesting because she's the one that makes the masks. So she kind of is like her own specialized force. We're going to talk about that here in a second. And he's like, well, that was your idea, wasn't it? Thanks to that, we don't have to rely on risky acts like stealing or hunting. So I guess that's what leads to this. So her idea led to her making the maps. It led to other people retrieving it, led to that. And he's like, well, that did help a lot. And that was a really good idea. He's like, the village has benefited plenty from that. So yes, we are very grateful to you. And you get part of the profit. And she's like, well, things aren't efficient enough. There should be things that can be more uniform. Those are what I want to find. And then he's like, Draka, I told you the village has benefited, so we're good to go. We must not be greedy. Why do we need more than we have? And then he talks about kind of the spirituality behind it, saying like our profits are a gift from God. We have the means to be fine. We're good. It's natural that they're shared equally, right? You must love your neighbor more. And she says, why? And he's like, because those are God's teachings. So this idea about, we're going to put on here, loving your neighbor, and sharing connected to God. Okay. And she's like, well, that's not enough. And he's like, what'd you say? And she's like, do you need more money? And he's like, why would you need more money? And he tells her, he's like, here's this loan. He's like, you're a contributor. If you want, I could loan you the money from our treasury at any time if you need to buy something specific, but I don't know why you're in such desperate need of it. And her reasoning is for peace of mind. Which I was like, ooh, okay. Which we're going to talk about here in a second. So she says that she needs more for a peace of mind. But there's so much to challenge and talk about in this episode that I want to get down into the nitty gritty of it. But we need to get past this scene first. And she's like, never mind, forget it, it's fine. And so she brings the uncle his dinner. And he's been hoarding some wine away and looking after this frail old man. We're going to talk about that whole thing. And she's like, these belong to everyone, so don't bully me. And he's like, my body has fallen prey to disease, and I'll soon depart for this world. There's a part of me that's like, based on his actions in this episode, I'm like, dude, you're about to die, and you sell your daughter rather than just say sayonara? Like, what? You're going to die. Your daughter has you're a niece, not daughter. She's like a daughter to him, but his niece. I'm like, she has a long life ahead of her. And she's like, well, you've been saying that for years and you haven't died yet. And she's like, you used to be much more sincere. How'd you end up like this? We're going to talk about that. So she asks the opinion. She's like, if we had individual competition, we could increase profits for the entire tribe. And he's like, well, yeah, that's possible. But he's like, I'm against it. And he's like, not because it defies God's teaching, but because it will destroy our unity. So he believes that if we go with this route, the uncle says it will destroy the unity. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that because at that point I was like, yeah, let's discuss this. Our population is too small for competition. And there's no bigger reason. It's true with more people we could stimulate competition, but that would create more disparity. So we're going to talk about that disparity. We're going to talk about that disparity. Like everything being set up here, I was like, oh, I want to go into more detail. There is no salvation for the weak. All right. No salvation for the weak. Okay. We're going to talk about that too. I'm just setting all of this up. Freedom without morals is mere chaos. So we're going to put that down here. Freedom without morals is chaos. Okay. Yep. And so he's like, there's no need to get upset. You're intelligent and you have a bright future. And she's like, you say that, but I worry sometimes. Could it be I'm destined to live my whole life here as I am? And he's like, don't worry. He's like, one day that conviction will show you the way. Your time hasn't come yet. So his view is all about this idea that your conviction will lead you to your fate. And that it's just not Draka's time. Well, it might be at the end of this episode going into the next episode. going into episode 18. So she goes by the riverside and sees the morning coming up and thinks back to that time as a kid. And that's when the uncle comes and sees her. All right. And the uncle, I'm getting ready to like burst into all of this, but I wanted to get past this. So he goes to see her and he's like, you know, you need to come back to the community. You need to come back. And he's like, you know, I'm your only family. You need to be part of the village and, you know, just cry in your tent. And she's like, no, I need to, you know, come out here and grieve. And he's like, why here? And she's like, because, you know, everyone says my father went to heaven. If they see me cry, it'll be like saying God's will was a lie. So she feels bad for grieving because she's like, you know, I shouldn't be grieving because everything's fine according to the will of God, but I'm still sad. And I'm like, everybody grieves usually when their family dies, and grieving is not, you know, I think some people in our own culture and our own society, they kind of get onto people. Like my best friend lost her father 2 years ago and she still grieves really hard for him. Like all the time. It's a process. Grieving is different for everyone. Some people grieve the rest of their lives for someone because they love them that much. And there's nothing wrong with that. I feel like people try to normalize or structure a convention around grieving, but it's very much an individualized process for everyone. And so I feel like Draka, you know, she's just grieving in her own way, but she's afraid the village is going to condemn her for not believing because she's grieving. So he tells her about 3 magic spells. And he's like, the first is that God doesn't exist. So the 3 magic spells. The third one he says she has to find out on her own. But the first one he puts down is that God does not exist. Is the first spell that he teaches her, according to him. He's like, there's no evidence. He's like, I suppose that the fact that we believe despite no evidence makes us believers. But it's an advantage, you know, once you stop believing, it'll give you more choices. You don't need to concern yourself. Don't let God take certain things from you, such as control of your emotions or your reason to live. He's like, don't hesitate to show your emotions. If you understand that, I'll move on to the second, which is learn as much as you can. Learn and think. And he talks about that leading you to truth. And then you'll figure out your conviction, and that's where the third magic spell comes in. Whatever your conviction is, it will give you a sense of purpose. If you continue in a world with no God, one day the third spell will naturally reveal itself to you. He's like, conviction will allow you to conquer your fears and stop crying. He says, my conviction is to survive, even if it means abandoning my convictions. And she's like, well, that doesn't sound right. And he's like, well, it's what we call a contradiction. But if once you understand that, it'll all make sense. So yeah. So then she comes to, I promise I'm getting to all of this. I just want to set it all up before we get to the wine cellar scene. So she sees the money and says, my father died while he was out plundering, and this is what he left behind. So she thinks, now granted, she's a kid, so this is her. The crazy thing to me is that she attaches herself to this childhood understanding of why her father died, but she never questions that childhood conviction. She just kind of rolls with it. And she's like, why did my father die? He went plundering because that's how we survive. And I was like, but didn't the village leader say you all have enough to get by? So that in itself, I feel like that logic is a little off, because she says that her father, he plundered to survive. Now I'm going to put her, I got a little cut there. I'm going to put her words there and then kind of like what I would say instead. She's like, if we had more money, she's like, he had to plunder to survive. But if we had more money, he wouldn't have had to plunder. And if we'd had more money, that means that he wouldn't have had to take the risk, which means he would have lived if that were the case. So her assumption from that is that if we have more money, we won't have to worry about needing to plunder and do all this. We'll be safe. But without money, she says, I'll be weak. And that's it. Which I'm kind of like, girl, you haven't questioned that childlike conviction since you were a kid, but she's never talked to anybody about it. So why would she question it? So she's like, if I have money, money will equal strength. And so, yes. Now, with that conviction, she's like, I'm going to I'll earn money until the fear is gone from my heart. That was Father's message. So the money will chase fear from her heart, is what she believes from this, right? Okay. And then she moves on. She's like, I have to keep thinking of ways. And that's when we get to the wine scene. So, okay. So this is where it gets really, really, really interesting because there's a lot to break down before we even get any further with meeting Antony and all that. Oh, man. I'm going to cut on my hand. Anyway, I'm going to put some pressure on that while I talk to y'all. So with this, it baffles me, the discussion of greed. It's the discussion of greed. Money is kind of like one of the roots of all sin. I personally believe it really is. And I have found how it drives me and makes me bitter and makes me hateful. And I have had to like let go of a lot of that, which is kind of crazy. Like it's wild to me. So for example, I had a friend that we went on a trip and they had asked for some money to help pay for part of the trip. And I had the money at the time and I was like, yeah, I'll loan you the money. And it was a decent amount. But I don't need it now. I've been able to work past it. I don't need the money. But for a while, they kept saying they were going to pay me back and it just never happened. And I found myself getting more and more upset. And then they were one of my really close friends. I was getting very upset and kind of bitter about not getting that money back. And then I thought about it, like months had passed. And I thought about it and I was like, do I need the money to pay my bills? No. Do I need the money to get anything immediately that I need? No. Was the trip that I took with my friend really amazing and we had a fantastic time and made memories that I can't trade for that money? Yeah. So I told them a few weeks ago, they were like, oh, hey, I'm planning out my bills and I've had a hard time. And they really have. Like, they've really been struggling a little bit. And they were like, I'm going to pay you back. And I was like, don't. And they were like, well, I really, I was like, no. I was like, it's been half a year. And I was like, no, I don't need the money and you need to pay bills. I'm like, I'm not worried about it. And what I'm telling this story to say is that the moment I said, you don't have to pay me back anymore, it felt like this weight and bitterness inside of me just like left my body completely. And I suddenly felt 1,000 times better because I wasn't worried about this in the grand scheme of things, this insignificant amount of money. And it felt so much better to not worry about it. And then I was like, no, we're good. We had a great time. It was a good trip. You got to pay bills. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And that was that. And I felt so much relief from not having to be I felt like a miser for the longest time because I was so obsessed with this money that in the wrong run didn't matter. So we talk about this two forms of, the village. The village is like, look, we're making profit. Everybody's working together. We're all doing this as a group. We don't make a lot of money, but we make enough to survive. We're doing fine. And we all contribute and we all get a benefit from it. And Draka's argument is, well, some people don't work as hard as others. And I'll tell you right now, I've worked many a job. There are always, even in a capitalist society, there are always people not working as hard as the others. There just is. You'll never escape that, right? And people, I know her incentive is that, we'll make more competition And that competition, it'll get people to earn. Now, the moment she said, some could even earn all the money. And I'm like, well, then what? The uncle brings up that the village is too small to foster that competition successfully. And here's the thing. Draka is fine with this because she's coming from a place of privilege. And you don't think that at first. You're like, oh, well, Draka doesn't have any family. She just has her uncle. She doesn't have her parents, and she's earning the same amount as the village. But we established in this episode, she's in a place of privilege because she has a skill that puts her in a position where she is needed, where she is valued, where she is essential to the supply chain. She makes the maps so the people can go get the clothes. She doesn't go get the clothes. She doesn't go get the clothing. She doesn't hang the clothing up. She doesn't wash it. She doesn't repurpose it. The other people in the village do that. But she's kind of at the top of this chain. So she's kind of in a place of privilege where she's the person that has the skills that is needed. So for her to demand more money, she's in this privileged place where of course she can demand more money because her skill is valued. But here's the thing. She's young. She's young. She's smart. She has this skill set. So she's in a prime position where her demanding more money and promoting this capitalist mindset is beneficial to her. So why wouldn't she? Right? But she's not seeing it from the angle that the uncle sees it. Because you would think, given how she talks and how she's been influenced by her uncle and how she's learned from him this kind of atheist, self-sufficient mindset, everybody's out for themselves mindset, you would think the uncle would want to be in full support of her. But here's the thing with that. The uncle is sick. The uncle is old. His health is not good. He's been able to hold on probably as long as he has because of the village working together, because of the unity he's talking about. He's like, yes, that would earn us some more money. But the more you create this competition amongst the people for money, what's going to happen is you're going to create these disparities where somebody is going to get a lot more money than somebody else. And you're going to start creating these gaps where certain people, if there's only so many clothes to gather and you tell people that whoever gathers the most is going to make the most money, who's going to be able to gather the most? Your youth, you're physically able, you're athletic. That's not going to apply to everybody. So then what happens to the people who are elderly that can't run as fast anymore or work as fast anymore? What happens to the people who are disabled, who physically cannot keep up with the methods of production that you've done? What happens to those people? Well, what happens to those people is what happens to those people now in our society. They don't make as much. They become part of the disparity. They don't earn as much, and their way of life is not as equal as those others that are in the same boat as them. So the uncle is a testament of this. The uncle's like, oh, now, wait a minute. This village, we all get along and we all have this unified, workforce and everybody earns the same. So I'm in the same boat as somebody that's more physically able. And that seems unfair to the physically able person. But the thing about aging and the thing about Draka wanting all this money is at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money you have. You're going to die. All of us are going to die at some point, regardless of how much money we have. It's not going to matter. Doesn't matter. You can't take it with you is the phrase that's said a lot around here. You can't take it with you. So that amount at the end of the day means nothing. But you want to have a quality. It's like is the quality worth more than the quantity? And it depends. Like you could argue that, well, by Draka's idea, some people would have a more quality life. Like she reminds me of Belle in Beauty and the Beast. She wants to get rid of this provincial nomad town and go move somewhere else. But I was like, the moment you leave, it's kind of the crazy thing. She has this setup where, yeah, it's not fancy. It's not luxury. Everybody's not living in the lap of luxury here in this nomad village, but they're all unified. They all are making the same amount. They're all living within their means. They're fine. They're comfortable. They're able to celebrate what they've been having the opportunity to get, and that's it. She's a woman in the Middle Ages. The moment she leaves this nomad village and goes into town, she's in the same boat as Yolanta. Do you think they're going to care about this woman who can read a map and treat her the same as the men in town? No. I don't know exactly how Poland works, but my thought too was she's a person of color. So is that going to mean that she's going to get the same amount as like Yolinda's situation? I don't know, but probably not. So the moment she leaves to go into a society that is run under this guise, I'm like, girl, you've just gone from being treated as an equal to being the bottom of the ladder because society deems that you're not worthy as much as your male counterparts. So you'll never get as much as you want. You can never rise to the top based on your skill alone because they don't view this ladder the same way your village views its equality. So not only that, but this concept where more money is going to make me happier and less afraid of death. It may make you less afraid of death, but that's a symptom. You're not curing the end result. Money doesn't solve or cure death. It just maybe prolongs it. But that's not even guaranteed, right? There's so many other factors, your genetics, circumstance, everything else that goes along with it. When she said that her dad plundered to survive, I disagree. It sounds like from the village, her dad was like her and wanted more. And when the village wasn't giving him more than he wanted, he got greedy and he went and tried to pillage from the village next over. And they were like, no. And he got killed. So it wasn't that more money would give him strength. It clearly didn't. He got killed. But it's like the money isn't going to give you a stronger heart. The money is going to make you more insecure, more bitter, and more fragile. It really does. And I love the conversation in this episode about where does religion come into play with all of this? Because this is where this chart came from, right? So the uncle is pretty much an atheist. He doesn't believe in God. He just believes in himself and his own convictions. We saw where that got us in this episode. He ended up trading his own niece's existence for his own, even though he's established he's probably going to die. But yeah, for him, that it was like the freedom without morals was chaos. Or freedom without morals is not loving thy neighbor. That's for damn sure. So I created this kind of chart. It used to be like one was the church and one was heliocentrism. But now we kind of have heliocentrism's over here in this corner. And then the church is over in this corner. And I guess atheism is over in this corner. We might as well just I don't know. Atheism is, we're going to just put atheism and just put like a rainbow. Ha! But no faith in a higher power. So we have here faith in a higher power. And you have on one end the church, and on one end heliocentrism, because heliocentrism does believe in a higher power at its core. And then you have, no faith in the higher power. And so that's kind of our y-axis, right? Our x-axis is now going to be, we have faith in higher power, no faith in higher power. And our x-axis is going to be serving ourself and then serving the community and others in the world. So we're like selfishness versus selflessness. And then we have faith versus no faith is our new like axiom here. So heliocentrism is about having a faith in a higher power, maybe not God necessarily, but of the earth, of nature, of a higher power, of its existence and its pull. But it also is about finding out truths that is going to benefit the community and the world around us, not just ourselves, but the world around us. And then the church right now has this higher power faith in God, but it also is serving themselves. It's self-serving, right? And a lot of church, it claims to be for a community, but at the end of the day, most, especially in Christian churches, most I've seen, it's like, no, it's for your benefit, right? I was talking about religion with my best friend, and my best friend has started going back to church sessions and stuff, and she was talking about how it really was for herself. She wanted to go back to connect to her faith, to connect to a higher power, but she's doing it because she needs stability. She needs some order. She needs somewhere that gives her a sense of belonging. And so it very much is serving herself. Others, like I feel like I'm Christian, but I also believe it's mainly in the higher power that is around us. And so I feel more like Hubert, especially after watching this show, but it's really just more for a gaining of that sense. So if we're putting everybody on the map here, I would argue if we're going for faith in higher power but serving themselves, Antony is right up there in the corner. Antony does not care about anybody else but himself, and he hides behind the guise of faith to do it, is really where he's at. Now, OG Bodini, the very first time we met Bodini, I would have put him here under serving himself and having that faith, because he really was like, I'm going to find out heliocentrism. I'm going to publish it for myself. I'm not going to give anybody else credit. It's for my own gain so that I'm closer to God. And it was very self-serving. So OG Bodini, we'll put there. Novak, I put Novak kind of in the middle. He's not just self-serving because he cared about his daughter. His daughter was really important to him. He didn't really care about anybody else. But his daughter was important to him, and that wasn't just self-serving. So he's kind of right in the middle, but he's up here on having this faith in a higher power. He's right in the middle of serving others and serving himself. So we're going to put Novak there. Then, on the opposite end, we have the uncle. The uncle has no faith in a higher power, and he's self-serving. He only believes in himself, his own convictions, screw everybody else. Because to him, having no faith in a higher power, there's no consequence. I can do whatever I want, and it's every man for himself. There's no consequence, whatever. And then Draka's kind of, I feel like Draka maybe is not as quite atheist as her uncle, but is still like very self-serving. She wants the money for herself, right? Then we have, I like because it's kind of catty corner, like perpendicular, diagonally across, diagonally opposed as you would. So you have the uncle here, pre-death Bodini on the gallows, I feel was more, still had his higher faith and power, so not like the uncle at all. And instead of being self-serving, he wanted heliocentrism to go out and show the masses. And I was like, that's that. I love how he just like crossed over the threshold from the beginning of his arc to the end. And then Yolenta and Aksha, I put them on either side. Yolenta and Aksha, they're right up here. They're in the heliocentric wheelhouse. Hubert's up here in the heliocentric wheelhouse. I put Raffle under this axis because I feel like Raffle did question his faith a little bit, but he was in it for finding out of the truths and getting it out to the public. So I feel like Raffle and Hubert are kind of like on like parallel sides of the x-axis here, right? What's interesting to me is the concept of, because there were a lot of things like, I don't think there's a problem with, I feel like at times we go to extremes. Like, I don't think there's a problem if people have different religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs. That's fine. We're all individual. At the end of the day, we all have our own journeys with our spirituality and what we do with that. But I do find that this episode is kind of a push to show the benefits of spirituality, the benefits of believing in a higher power, or at least believing in what that higher power represents. Because the uncle, you know, the uncle's whole thing of having no faith and only faith in himself leads him to be a very selfish and greedy and unkind person. Because what uncle would sacrifice his own niece to someone as horrible as Antony and just self-serve himself? Like, the idea of the idea of our world just being a bunch of people out for themselves with no sense of community or no sense of unity, except when it benefits us, is pretty nihilistic and pretty sad. And while I have a lot of problem with religious extremists who take it too far, because I feel like when they take the religious extremism too far, you get like Antony, where you're just self-serving and you're doing it under the guise of being holier than thou, but you're really not. You're really not. Right? You're not out for the best interests of other people. There was a story in the US that it was being, a lot of YouTube influencers were talking about it, but it's been on TikTok, where this woman was homeless and she didn't have a home. It was just her and her little chihuahua, and she was staying in her car to sleep at night. Which, I don't know if you've ever slept in a car before. I did once when I was a kid. When I was at a livestock show traveling with my mother on the road, we didn't have a camper. And so one night we were sleeping in the barns with the livestock. We were sleeping in the cattle barns on hay bales. And one night it was pouring down rain, and the rain was starting to like blow in to where the hay bales were. And my mom was like, let's go sleep in the car so that we don't have to get wet. And I was like, okay. If you've ever slept in a car before, it is in my opinion, one of the most uncomfortable places to sleep in a car. It's so uncomfortable. You have to be at a pretty low point in your existence to be like, this'll do. I mean, sleeping on hay bales because we didn't have money to buy a hotel. So my mom was like, let's just sleep on the hay bales with the cows. And I was like, okay. And I was a kid, so it was fun, but we really just didn't have the money to buy a hotel at the time. But that night sleeping in a car, I was like, yeah. Like as a kid, I thought it was fun. And I was probably like 10 at the time. I thought it was like something really cool and fun to do. But looking back now, I'm like, oh yeah, we just didn't have money. And so I was like, oh yeah. So, that to willingly sleep in your car takes a certain point in your existence, right? To be at. But the point of this story is that she went to a church parking lot and she slept in her car and the church called the police on her because they didn't want her in the parking lot. And she went into the church the next day and said, I was told I couldn't stay here. You're a church. This is supposed to be a place of welcoming and of acceptance and of community. And they were just having none of it. And I was like, at that point, you're like, Antony, you're self-serving. You don't care about others. You just are hiding within this self-righteousness, right? Because it makes you feel less afraid of death. You've convinced yourself that, oh, well, I'm a follower. I'm faithful. I'm going to heaven. I'm going to do this. But you really aren't caring about loving your neighbor. You don't care about them. It's just about you. And I'm kind of like, that's sort of, in my opinion, getting away from the teachings a little bit to where I'm like, are you going? I don't know if you are or not. I don't know. So yeah, anyway, I thought that was fascinating, and such an interesting thing here. But I do think that this series is saying that a lot of the reason that faith exists and that churches exist and that religion exists is that religion helps give you that moral code. You may be Buddhist, you may be Hinduist, you may be Christian, you may be something else, but it gives you a moral code as a human being that shows you how to treat others and gives you, because humans like being rewarded. That's Draka's whole thing, is that she wants to be rewarded and she feels like she's not getting what she's earned for her position. And that kind of is tied to, we all want to have this reward at the end of the day for, okay, if we treat our fellow man kindly, what do we get out of it? And that's just human. That's just humanity in a nutshell. What do we get out of it? And so if you don't have those morals, then or that code, what you get out of it is just, like the uncle says, your survival. And I pushed this person down and I got to live. Survival of the fittest. Even though he wasn't the fittest, he was willing to sacrifice her to save himself. I don't know, it opens up so many interesting discussions, and how he has this quiet luxury with a book and with his wine, and he was willing to literally give up his flesh and blood, his only flesh and blood, to have a chance to have that one more time, even though he's like clearly, as the niece has said, on the verge of death. And then you have Antony, Antony is the least charitable person in this series. He's such a hypocrite because he's like, well, this territory belongs to me. And I'm like, wow, the Christian values. It's the homeless man. It's the homeless woman in the car. Here the uncle is like sitting there. He's like, oh, hey, he's like, I just come down here. I'm sorry. I'll give you all the wine. I just want to have this space. I'm so sorry. And Antony's like, yeah, cool. Don't care. Still going to arrest you because I can, it's wild. He's like, I'll take it and still arrest you. And he's like, they were going to take him and hang him. And he's like, even if you put me in a dungeon, I'll give you something more valuable instead. And of course, the moment you say valuable, Antony's like, but what could it be? And so he basically sacrifices his niece. And he preys on the fact that she wants a way out of the village and wants to learn more to sacrifice her. I would have been suspicious with all of his tapping on his leg. Would have been suspicious. But I also like the symbolism of him with the torch of fire, having a lot more knowledge in the situation, to her with her little candle not being as on the up and up, which is, interesting. And he tells her to wait in the one storage house. So we're back to the beginning. We're back to where Schmidt and all of them were. And she goes in the house that Free was in and saw the book and starts reading through it. So the book, I feel like the book is Aksha's. And it's called Orb on the Movements of the Earth. I feel like the book is a combination of Aksha and Bodini together. I feel like they took, again, I feel like it's a conglomeration where they've taken Hubert and Raffles' ideologies and their stuff, and they've added it to their own to create this, and it's so interesting. I kind of love it. But yeah, everything is unified under a single order. Humanity will be freed by heliocentrism on the movement of the earth. Roll freaking credits. But I kind of love it because it seems like it's Aksha's words, and Bodini was like, man, I can write a theoretical physics book all day long, but these peasants want a beach read. These peasants want a beach read. And it's like, yeah, I could write a physics textbook for y'all, but you're going to give more money and more of your time to the fiction, you know, which is fantastic. So I like the idea that Draka is like, I could make money off of this. I'm really curious. The book is right there. The book that Schmidt and them wanted. So either one of three things is going to happen next week. Draka is either going to escape with the book and leave her uncle behind and be like, peace out, Girl Scout. Or Schmidt and the others are going to come back with reinforcements or with reinforced weaponry and take out some of the men and make Antony go away. I don't think Antony's going to die next episode. That bitch is like a cockroach. And then, or Antony's going to get the text that Draka has taken and burn it. But I don't see that happening because we still have so many episodes left. I don't see them burning the textbook that Bodini and Aksha spent so much time on. You know? So, will Draka take the book and try to get it published? I don't know. How could you get it published? She's like, this isn't a religious textbook. It's just the author's own thoughts. It's provocative. Well, I would say provocative would be the word that Bodini would use to describe Aksha. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? It's not just the content that excites me. She's like, I can make a lot of money off this book. I could think and do it. But what does it mean to be accepted? This book needs to be accepted to make a lot of money. Historically, the thing most accepted by people is faith in God. So why are people so willing to accept God? Are they all afraid? Yeah, well, I think it's a combination. I think some people accept God easily because it assuages their fears. Some people accept God because it provides solace. And it gives something constant in their lives that they can look to and provide relief. Some people, it provides them truths about the world. It answers questions for them. Some people just need that moral code. They need something to give them a reason to do X, Y, and Z. It's not only because of fear, but it certainly is a part of it. And they find salvation from that. She's like, well, God is the only choice available. But instead of prayers that may or may not be answered, what if pleasure could certainly... Well, people do sometimes use pleasure to soothe those fears. But we could find excitement in accessible forms of pleasure. Yeah! That's here now. I was like, oh, all the yaoi behind me on the bookshelf? Sure. But I do think, I like the idea that Draka's getting at in that heliocentrism provides that stability and those answers and that faith without it being tied necessarily to like this one organization, right? It doesn't have to be with the church. It can be through other forms. And she talks about how people have grown suspicious over the way the church dominates their lives, and they want an opportunity to have another option on the table. And that's kind of where heliocentrism comes in. So the book's content, the church's unwavering authority. How do I produce this? Do I publish it in manuscript form? No, that would take too much time and effort. There needs to be some technique that will ease production. Well, to be honest, she does have at her disposal an entire village that can manage cloth. So it could just be like what Bodini did with the heads. Could be like with tattooing, you could print the text on the tapestries. You could print the text on the tapestries and do it that way through the clothing. Have people wearing a poncho that has heliocentric model on it. Why not? I don't know. She's like, and then of course she asks, has this book already been created? Who wrote it in the first place? I kind of love the fact that there are no names. The absence of names in the text is almost eerie. And at the end, it says, when it becomes safe to do so, give 10% of the profits to Pataki. The fact that Bodini and Aksha left that in when Aksha told him to leave it in. And Bunny's like, absolutely not. Why would I ever take that in? Blah, blah, blah. And then he left it in at the end. Oh! The shipping, y'all. The shipping. Love it. Absolutely love it. So yeah. So my question is, if we mass produce it, will the village get involved? What would be their incentive to get involved? Will Draka pay them to get involved and do it? I don't know. Will she invest the money that she's been hoarding to make the book more accessible and to make profit and try to counter that? I don't know. What is she going to get away from Antony and them? That's the question. I do love her face at the end where she's like, this is what you mean by changing fate. That's probably going to be the thumbnail. I freaking love that shot. That's such a good face in that moment where she's like, really, uncle? Bitch, I brought you wine. I checked on you and brought you dinner every night. How dare you? I'll do anything to survive, he says. Ooh, but yeah, I think a lot of Elon Musk and some of the billionaires in the world nowadays. And I think that, yeah, you can have all this money, but at the end of the day, you're going to die. Everybody is. It's like, is it worth it? You could do so much. And that's the thing. Money, her saying it's not enough. Once you get greedy and start hoarding, it's never enough. Because the trick of it is, you'll never have enough money to stop death. You'll never have enough money to stave off that fear. You can collect, and be as greedy as you want, but it will never help in the end. So, could you stay as happy and simplistic and, mediocre, but yet managing and surviving with this? Or do you want to push people? Because the thing of it is, in Draka's methods here, someone's going to fall through the cracks and be killed because of your actions. Your actions are going to lead to somebody starving, someone being too poor, someone not being able to keep up. And this method here means you don't care as long as you're okay. This over here, well, yeah, you're not going to be in the lap of luxury. Everybody's in the same boat. So that community is here. This selfishness is here. And our society as a whole is in this part. So yeah, fun times. Ha! Lots to talk about in this episode. I've talked for like nearly an hour about it. Fun times. I like Draka's character a lot. I'm excited to see what she does with this book. If Schmidt and them are going to like intervene next episode, that's going to be interesting to see. But I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more of Orb on the movements of the earth. And I'll see you then.